stop, Colonel.
Welcome back. This is a simple mission in concept, though in execution it becomes rather more tricky. The basic idea is we've got a patrol, a bunch of nav points, and the mission's made a bit more complicated by the fact that we have the Sheffield at this nav and the Victory at the final one, both of which need a bit of protecting, though they do take care of themselves to some extent as well.
Attack my target.
What also makes it more complicated, as by now you have no doubt noticed, is that my controls aren't quite working properly. This is because, due to the decision made in the cutscene, Colonel Blair is drunk. And as a result of Colonel Blair's alcoholism, I have two, maybe three things that have gone wrong with the controls. The first one, and the most obvious one, is that periodically, well, not quite periodically, but around 15 seconds with the randomizer built in, the controls reverse themselves, so left becomes right, up becomes down, until they switch back again. So a lot of the time you'll see me describing a loop with my fighter and then suddenly changing direction, just like now. And the other one is that the sensitivity of the controls varies as well, so sometimes the fighter flies like an arrow, and sometimes it flies like a longbow, and sometimes it's somewhere in between. The combination of these two factors make this mission incredibly difficult. The strategy guides for it will say, don't get drunk, basically, and that's pretty good advice, because I'm playing this on veteran, and that level is set sufficiently low that I can basically rely on Hobbs to do all the work. You'll be hearing that phrase quite a lot. And similarly, I'll be showing what's effectively edited highlights of this, because the full video took about 35 minutes flight time, but it is not counting takeoff, landing, and Rollins' debrief. And most of that time was just me flying around in circles, unable to draw a bead on the enemy because, well, you can see how much difficulty I'm having here, trying to get the Corvette under my gun sights. And the Corvette's a large target that doesn't dodge. So when we move on to enemy fighters, which are much smaller targets that do dodge, you can imagine how well it's going to go.
I have failed my race.
Enemy target destroyed.
I have failed.
Now at this nav point we have the Sheffield, which helps by finishing off those Corvettes and will continue to help for a bit. The Sheffield's really good at this difficulty level because its anti-matter guns can't really track fast moving targets or targets that dodge a lot, but this is veteran, so the Kilrathi ships have fewer hit points and therefore the anti-matter guns do a lot more damage when they hit, and also enemies don't dodge as much, so the Sheffield can track them with the guns. That means it's almost capable of taking care of itself entirely here, but not quite. On my first attempt at this mission drunk, I did lose the Sheffield, but I've figured out that provided you manage to distract the enemy fighters a bit, especially the next wave, which are much more distractible than these Vectoths are, then it's not a big issue and the Sheffield will survive. I'll be doing another run of this mission sober on Nightmare as a bonus video because, as I said before, I'll do the hardest mission in the game on Nightmare. Well, this is the hardest mission in the game, even when Blair is sober.
Enemy target destroyed. Enemy target destroyed.
And on that I'll actually use the Sheffield an awful lot because on Nightmare the Sheffield is much less capable of taking care of itself. It can't do as much damage with guns relative to the number of hit points the Kilrathi have got, and it's also much less capable of tracking enemies on that difficulty.
Enemy target destroyed.
And now though, a couple of missiles is enough to keep the Sheffield alive, since one IR missile can kill a Dark Hit, which makes it a pretty good choice of fighter to use an IR missile on.
Sighted enemy craft, Colonel.
And
Break and attack.
as I've said, it doesn't need all that much help. Next nav, this is the evil nav. I'll be here for a long time. Start off with the Vectoths. Now, every fighter is difficult on this special drunk difficulty level, because you can't basically hold anything in the crosshairs long enough to do any damage to it sufficient to get through the shield. So your only way of doing any significant damage is with a missile. But that means that the heavy fighters are the worst of all, because a single missile isn't enough to kill those. Even a heat seeker won't do substantial damage to a Pactan or a Pactoth. So I'm basically in a situation with those where I can't really do much, which is why basically what happened there is that I ended up flying around in circles for a very long time. I didn't even get the fighters in crosshairs very much, and waited while Hobbs killed them all. Now we have two ways of drafting. On Nightmare difficulty, and I think actually on Ace as well. The second wave of these Drouthy, there's two waves of 6, this is the first one of them, arrives while you're still dealing with the first one. I think it's after you kill 2 or 3 ships. And that makes this the hardest single engagement in the game, because you've got 9 fighters here, and quite often on hard difficulty levels, Hobbs will have ejected by now, so you're hopelessly outnumbered. And it's just a case of using every bit of the arrow's speed and manoeuvrability you've got to try and whittle the enemy fighters down slowly and hope to outlast them. And that's the engagement that makes it the hardest mission in the game. And that, more than anything else, is why I'm using my missiles here, because I'm operating on a sort of autopilot which says use your missiles on the Drouthy. Now, I think actually the Drouthy were the right fighters to use my heat seekers on. I'm going to save my remaining missiles for the last set of fighters we meet, and that, as it turns out, is a complete waste of time. There was no reason to do that. They were completely superfluous. I think, with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what I know now about this mission, I think the correct thing to do was to use the image recognition missiles on the Dark Hits. That would be all 4 of them rather than just 2. And the heat seekers on the Drouthy here, but it's not a huge issue. I mean, this is not a hard mission to complete on Veteran while drunk, because Hobbs is going to do all the work, and because
I'm happy to report that I've suffered no damage.
you're doing something very similar to how the Conathi fly. You have one fighter flying a somewhat straight course but with a lot of turns, twists and jukes, because basically my controls change direction every 30 seconds, so I juke when that happens regardless of what I'm trying to do. You've got the bait and the gunner behind shredding the fighters that aren't paying any attention to them, and that's really effective. So Hobbs is going to back up a whole ton of kills here. Just be glad he's on our side, because this is the most effective I can recall a wingman ever being in Wing Commander 3. I'm not sure what I think about this mission in a game design sense. I mean, in the abstract, it's a really good idea. Wing Commander 3 was one of the first games to really come up with this idea of futzing with the interface to represent a condition that the player has,
Objectives accomplished.
rather than... I mean, several games have turned the screen black to represent blindness or something like that, but actually changing your inputs, I think that was pretty novel in 1994.
Break and attack.
And it's a good idea, and it's been used several times since. The specifics of how it was done, I'm not sure I'm entirely in favour of. Wing Commander 3 is all about accuracy in your gunfire, because you don't have a shield sphere to aim at like you in a lot of space games, and because the profiles of all the Kilrathi fighters except for Pactan are very narrow in at least one direction. It means that it's much less about getting the enemy under your gun sights and much more about being able to hit them once they're there. I'm demonstrating that pretty well right now with these Straka. The Straka are the most annoying enemy by far when they're drunk, because they aren't really good at dodging, so you spend a lot of the time being able to hit them, turned in the right direction, but they're so small, and of course they disappear and make you lose your lock, so you haven't got the ITTS reticle to tell you where to aim, that you have a lot of firing opportunities, but you very rarely actually hit. That's part of what makes the Excalibur so awesome, the fact that that aspect is almost completely removed because the Excalibur hits when you've got a firing opportunity. So It's that factor, the fact that accuracy is way more important in Wing Commander 3 than it is in pretty much every other space game around, and that's part of the reason I don't actually like this space combat as much as I like standoffs or Prophecy Secret Ops, that engine, where it was much easier to hit the enemy. Which is a bit odd because my main hobby is archery, so you'd think that I'd be into the whole aiming thing, but I don't know, aiming and archery is a very different thing. Anyway, the point is, and I'll get to this point eventually, having sidetracked myself twice so far, is because Wing Commander 3 is so much about the accuracy point, because this difficulty takes that away from you completely, in that you just can't do the fine control you need to aim your guns at all. It makes this practically impossible. I mean, I've achieved this level by dropping the difficulty down to Veteran, wherein normally I would play it on Nightmare. I did try it on Ace, I couldn't do it. Well, I suspect I might have been able to do it eventually with a lot of practice to almost get used to it, but we're talking like weeks here. It's just not worth it. As well as the factors I mentioned before about how your controls reverse and that the sensitivity changes, there's the fact that you're playing this for so long, it's actually really disorienting. And after a while, I'm still not sure if your controls sometimes rotate, so you end up flying left when you pull the stick back rather than up. And that's because I just get so lost after playing this for 20 minutes that I'm not quite sure what's going on. And like I've said, this mission's about 30-35 minutes long while you're playing it like this. So because you've lost that ability to aim, you're basically helpless. And like I've said, all the strategy guides for this mission just say don't do it drunk. So you only have really what you're expected to do is fly this once, realise it's impossible, reload your save, and pick the safer option in the cutscene. And because of that, it greatly limits the effect that doing this hugely new, innovative, really good idea actually had on the game, because nobody's going to experience it for very long at all. So if they had made it a bit less impossible, or if they had put it on a mission that was shorter or otherwise easier than this one is, because this is incredibly hard. It could just be me, but my general sort of understanding of gamer psychology is that most of us hate decreasing the difficulty. So if you started it on one difficulty level, you'll damn well finish it on that level. I know I'm like that. This LP's been a bit different because it's been more, I'm doing what the thread says, so they say play it on Veteran, then I'm happy to play it on Veteran, and I don't feel that I'm cheating in some way because of that, though even in this case I have gone out and said I'm going to do the hardest mission on Nightmare just to prove that I can do it, despite the fact that you guys have seen me play Standoff and probably know I'm pretty good at these games by now. Anyway, the point is that gamers are not generally going to decrease the difficulty, so they'll probably do the other alternative, which is just to replay the game with Sablenist 1. So you're not going to see the effect of the decision, and that, I think, is a shame. I think that a lot of Origins innovation was hidden like that. So if they'd made it a bit less impossible, more people would have done it. So this is what I said earlier about my missiles being superfluous here, because these Sorthak are a colossal pain. If you think about playing it on Nightmare, by this stage your fighter's a complete wreck. Hob has probably ejected 3.5 points ago. You've got the two other fighters here, but still it would be really useful to have missiles at this point. So my thinking was I didn't need them for the Jalpi, so I'd keep them for here. Of course, on Veteran, Sorthak doesn't have anywhere near as many hit points, and there's 4 friendly fighters here, and they just get swarmed and killed very easily. Still, they did get swarmed and killed very easily, and they are the last fighters, so I guess that's mission accomplished.
Need clearance, TCS Victory.
Colonel, you didn't exactly seem yourself out there, have you? Colonel, request to see you when you land. Hey, Lieutenant, I'm trying to work here, thank you very much. Unbelievable. What does she think this is, a free-for-all chat channel? You're cleared to land, Colonel. The victory only sustained minor damage.
So we're done. Thanks for watching. I've been Alanin, this has been Wing Commander 3 Heart of the Tiger, and after all that I think I need a drink.